This video is going to talk about instrumentation in pop music. So there's a wide variety of stuff that we can have going on with different kinds of pop songs that are out there. A lot of this has its roots in the jazz ensemble, in blues, and in rock and roll as well. But this really drives a lot of how we look at things. So when we're doing this, we are breaking our instrumentation down into three different categories. We have our core instruments or types of instruments that absolutely have to be there for this song to work. Common instruments that don't necessarily have to be there, but are often there. And then optional instruments, which we're not going to talk about much at all, but basically anything else that could be added sort of shows up there in the end. So first, we're going to check out this idea of core. And when we're talking about core, what we're really talking about is what we call the rhythm section. The rhythm section is a combination of three types of instruments that are absolutely necessary for a song to exist. Now, we're going to broaden this out because they don't necessarily have to be actual instruments. They could be digital instruments, particularly in today's music, but they're things that absolutely need to be there so that we know how this music is going to work. So the three types of instruments that we need is, first, we need some sort of percussion. Something that is going to keep the beat, keep things moving forward, so on and so forth. The next thing that we absolutely have to have is we have to have some sort of a bass melodic instrument, something that's going to play our bass line, stay down at the foundation. It's often outlining the chord for us, and that's its function there. And then the last thing that we need to have is we need to have some sort of a chord instrument, something that can play instruments simultaneously and is able to keep things going that way. Okay, so percussion, your most common example of percussion that you're going to hear is your drum set. It's going to have everything you need there. You're able to get the backbeat in and the bass and whatever the 8-beat or the 4-beat is. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but you can have that there. Your most now, hold on. Now, there are some other options that you could have here. You could have, bongos. You could have claves. You could use a djembe if you wanted to. You could use digital instruments that have that effect of percussion that's going to help keep the beat going throughout the song. Those are all available. A bass melodic instrument, most often you're going to hear an electric bass or a string bass. Those are all perfectly eligible. You do hear others. There's a video out there that if you want to find on YouTube where a guy uses a bassoon to be the bass melodic instrument. Those are things that are acceptable options for you. So that's what you have there. And then your chord instrument is actually where you get, frankly, a little bit more variety, but there are two really common ones. The piano is a chord instrument, and then the one that you hear most often, or also, well, I shouldn't say most often in like rock music, for example, is the guitar. But you have all these instruments working together, and they create what's called your rhythm section. And those are really your core instruments. Those are the things that you have to have for a song to work. Now, there's all sorts of variety out there, right? So you could have a vocal a cappella song that technically they're all voices, but you have your vocal percussionist who's handling your percussion. You usually have a bass vocalist who's doing the bass line, and then you have a group of your singers that are creating those chords to get that effect there. So there are lots of different ways you can do this. Like I mentioned before, you could put this together with electronic instruments and have something that's functioning as your percussion, something that's functioning as your bass melody, and something that's functioning as your chord instrument. Those are all options that are available to you. You have plenty going on there. Now, your common instruments. These are instruments that you're going to usually hear in pop music, but they're not necessarily core. They're not things that are absolutely required. So common instruments, voice, having a vocalist in some way, shape, or form really plays a strong role in all of this. A second guitar, so you'll often have what they'll call the rhythm guitar, then they'll have the lead guitar. That's another one that tends to show up often. One particular thing that I think is just worth staying aware of is the use of brass. And this is something that's quite common and creates what we call jump band instrumentation. So when, in addition to your rhythm section, you have a collection of brass instruments. So you'll have some trumpets, maybe some trombones, and then we lump saxophone into this, even though it's technically a woodwind, but here we are, it's working. But you get a group of those together, and they tend to play these tight lines that, kind of tend to go up and down, and they move together, sort of like that. That is what we think of as jump band instrumentation, and it's something that has its roots in sort of the big band ensemble, but then carried its way over into a lot of contemporary music that we hear today. And there are references to it all over the place. You'll see Super Bowl performances where there are people out there pretending to play these instruments, but they're not even playing them. But that sort of thing starts to show up. So knowing what a jump band instrumentation is can be really valuable to you, just because it's something that has a strong foundation in the history of popular music. Now, again, there is a whole world of electronic sounds that you can tend to these days especially land in this common instrument category. That there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So there you go. And then the last part, I'm really not going to touch on it, but optional instruments. There's so many things that you could add. I mean, we've heard bagpipes, we've heard violin, we've heard recorder, penny whistle. There's so many different instruments that you can add in. They're going to give the piece of music a unique color, something that really matters to them. So keep track of this. One of your assignments for this week is to go find a song that at least has your core instruments, which won't be hard to do because they all have them in some category, and then see what other common instruments you can find. See if you can find a song that has a jump band instrumentation. These are all really good, useful things. Upload that link, tell us about what instruments there are, and you will be right on track.